We are here in lovely St. Andrew's Episcopal Church in Haw River, North Carolina, to talk with their rector, the Reverend Miriam Saxon, who many of you know and remember from her time as a parish intern and then on the staff at Church of the Good Shepherd. And we're so glad that you could spend some time with us today. Miriam, we want to talk about bereavement. We know that you have special skills and gifts there, and we hope that you'll be able to help us out as we form a parish ministry team to do various ministries of pastoral care in Good Shepherd.
And might add that I happen to be a hospice chaplain, so that's why this is a subject near and dear to me. Do you mind if I begin with the prayer?
That would be wonderful.
Let us pray. Teach us, loving God, not to hold on to life too tightly. Teach us to hold it lightly, not carelessly, but lightly, easily. Teach us to take it as a gift, to enjoy and cherish while we have it, and to let it go gracefully and thankfully when the time comes. The gift is great, but the giver is greater still. You, O God, are the giver, and in you is the life that never dies. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
I love that prayer.
Oh, yes. Miriam, what are the most important preparations to take when meeting with those who are experiencing grief and loss?
Well, I would always pray before going. I'd go with an open heart without any kind of pre-plan or preconceived thing, because it's hard to know, even if you know these people really well. And remember that God's already there first, that you're not bringing God in, God's already there. I think it's important to remember that even if you've lost a child, like the place you're going to, or lost a parent, you can in some ways understand that grief, but you need to remember you don't know. You don't know what it's like for them, even if you've had a similar experience. And I think don't go in saying, what can I do? We're all helpers, because they're not, in the midst of grief, they're not going to be able to tell you. They don't know. So come in and say, can I go to the grocery store for you? Can I, straighten the bedrooms? Can I vacuum for you? But don't ask them or expect them to give you an answer. But just go with an open heart.
Thank you. Sort of related to that, what should you be prepared to expect when meeting with someone? That is, conflicting emotions, a range of emotions, anger, fear, joy, concerns about finances, all those kinds of things.
Yeah, expect all of that. I really think, I don't know if medically it's true, but I think it's metaphorically true, that in the human brain, anger and fear and grief sit right by each other. So it's real easy to go back and forth amongst those. They're just so close. And I think you ought to be prepared. Well, I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time thinking about it because it will overwhelm you. But I think that knowing that a range of emotions. One of the best stories I heard when I was at Duke Divinity School was a professor who talked about a 5-year-old who'd been hit by a car in front of his house. And he was the pastor coming in. And he said he just went in and he sat down with the grieving mother and just said, damn, damn, damn. That's all he said. And then he just held her hand. He said there wasn't anything else to say. What a horrible thing had happened to her. So to just be present, I think, I always laugh about people talking about people expired. It's like you have flip the can over and it gives you a date. so say dead. They're dead. And I think it's good to talk about the deceased. I think we get kind of scared to think it'll make it worse for them. But if you've lost somebody, that's what they most want to do, is to talk about that person. As hard as that is, but they want to talk about them. And I encourage people not to say, I loved Bill when he was living. I would still love you when you're dead. I just would have to love you in a different way because I can't talk with you. So not using past tense, I think, is helpful. It keeps the person there. And don't be afraid to laugh. And don't be upset if people there are laughing. That's healthy. You need a break from it if you're amidst that much
Right.
grief. So, yeah.
What are some misconceptions surrounding grief and loss?
There are a lot of them. I think the worst one is, well, in time you'll get over it. Well, you'll learn to live with it, but you won't get over it. And I'm not sure anybody really wants, they don't want to be that lost in pain, but I don't think they want to get over that person. There's no timeline for this. People grieve. Some people get healthier in 6 months. Some people it may be 10 years before they do that. So that there's not a roadblock or an expectation. I think that's the most important thing to remember. So.
What do you think about closure, how that is used so often in talking about how people process grief?
Well, I think you'd have to ask what people think they mean by closure.
Right.
I for a long time, didn't think funerals were worth anything. I've come to think they're the reason we have those rituals. They don't give you closure, but they give you a sense of that door has closed. That person really is gone. When you walk in and there's the body, it's kind of hard to miss it.
Right.
Yeah. And when you lower that coffin or pour the ashes in the ground, yeah. So.
How can a person be present in another person's pain versus taking away or taking on the pain? Mm-hmm. What are some things we can do to facilitate this?
That's a tough one. First, you have to remember you can't take away their pain. It's their pain. You can't carry it for them. You can't make them happy. You can't bring that person back. You have to be willing to sit in that dark place, to simply go and say, I don't have anything to say. I love you. And not run in terror for, I think when people leave people that are grieving alone because they're so afraid they'll say the wrong thing, they'll just the fact that you show up
Mm-hmm.
is an incredible gift to those people. And you can't fix it, so you just sit with them. And I think it's helpful to remember, I tell people that have had a huge loss, you cannot ever be reasonably healthy again if you don't walk straight into it. You can't walk around it, you can't ignore it, you can't pretend it, you can't bag it up and put it somewhere, because it's going to come back and get you in the time that you're least able to handle it. So don't be afraid to walk into it. It's hard. It's really hard.
Would you address companioning / caring versus treating / curing, and walking alongside, not leading, as it pertains to grief and loss?
Well, companioning is about being with, not trying to fix, not thinking you have the answers, because you don't. It's about remembering that God is always healing something, even in the very, very darkest of things. And the difference between healing and fixing or curing. Healing is putting a salve on a wound. It's not stitching it up. I don't know if that answers your question, Bill.
I think you've given us a very good metaphor
Okay.
for that.
Okay.
How do you listen with the heart and not analyze with the head when being with those who are experiencing grief and loss?
Oh, we live in a society where we don't know how to shut up, and all of this is about just listening, and not planning to say anything. And we're not very good at that. We're fixers, we're analyzers, and this is not about the head at all. It's a heart pain.
this is the final question. What books, pamphlets, websites would you recommend that deal with grief and loss?
Well, I would not recommend Kubler-Ross's book. I don't think she ever intended those stages to be linear. You know, you go through this one, and this one, because grief is like this and sometimes like this. So don't pick up that book and think you got the answer. I do recommend, there's a wonderful, you know Barbara Crafton. She's been at Good
Right,
Shepherd.
right, yes.
She has this wonderful story called The Two Baskets that I would recommend. You can find on her website. It's about our basket being this, that it's not an afterlife, it's an also life. It's what we talk about in the Communion of Saints all the time, that those people are still all with us and around us, and it's just that we live in this little linear space where we can't. So I recommend that essay. There is a wonderful book. Here it is. John O'Donovan, To Bless the Space Between Us. It has two wonderful prayers about death, preparing for your own death, and about loss and death that I recommend strongly. Lots of music. Libby Roderick has this great song called It's a Holy Thing to Love What Death Can Take. It's really beautiful. You can find that, Google that. Joanne Cash has a wonderful song called Will You Remember Me? And as we were talking earlier, there's some great movies that aren't teaching about grief, but are like, what's the Tom Hanks movie about 9/11? Incredibly Loud and something like that, about a child whose father dies in it. We Bought a Zoo is a great movie. Wit is a great movie about somebody dying of cancer. Still Magnolias is a great story about grief.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And I have some materials I want to send home with you, with bibliographies and some other things that I think might be helpful. Oh, I found, if you'll indulge me for a minute, things not to say. If we have enough time.
Yes.
Some of these are good. Things not to say. Don't say everything will be okay, because at that moment it ain't okay, and it's not likely to gonna be okay, and they can't see that, and it'll just make people mad. And we just kind of close you up. Don't say, like I mentioned earlier, I know how you feel, because you don't. You really don't. It's God's will. Well, that makes God mean and petty. You know, if my 4-year-old is just drowned in the pond out back, and it's God's will, well, that's not the God I worship, who's infinitely loving. You shouldn't feel that way. Look at all the blessings you have. Well, that would be great 2 years from now. I can probably see those, but today I can't. You shouldn't be mad at God. I always refer people to, we have a really immense God who can absorb our anger. I read the Psalms. They're full of wailing at God. God knows best, or God took him or her. God never sends you more than you can bear. That's one of my least favorite. That's just not true when you're in the midst of grief. And besides, it says God sends you nasty things. And the last one, and especially never say this around the child, God needed another angel in heaven. You know how terrified that child's going to be that night when you go to bed, and thinking God's going to swoop in and snatch that child just like they took the brother. So those are good things to erase from your memory.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. This was fun. I wish y'all well.
Thank you.
I miss y'all.